And a good day to you. It is Take Two with Jerry and Debbie on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. The name of our show, Take Two, pretty much contains what our theme is and our goal for each day, Monday through Friday, when we come on the air with you. And that is to take a fresh look at an important topic, an issue, something that we're all dealing with, something that's in the news. And we're going to do just that today. Today we're going to talk about race and racism. Now, I can probably speak for Debbie. I know I can certainly speak for our guest. In my own life, I know people of all races, nationalities, languages, and I don't see anything different when I look at one of them or another of them. And that is certainly, it's a gift from God, but there are some people still in this world who perpetuate the idea that certain colors of skin should be treated differently than others. There are classes based on nationalities and skin color and language and so forth. And we're going to talk about this today. And my question initially, Debbie, is do we have a real, genuine, huge problem like the media might want us to think, or is it maybe not so bad, on the street level, in our neighborhoods where we live and in the marketplace and the workplace, but the media maybe just want us to think it's worse than it is. So this is a topic, Debbie, that our listeners, we're going to ask them to weigh in on with their takes today.
Yeah, so you drive the discussion, dear listeners. It's up to you. We're talking about race and racism. Is it a problem in our everyday life? Is the media just totally taking it to new heights and making us feel that it's a much bigger problem than it is in our own neighborhoods? And we would love to be able to hear from you. So you got to call in, though, and you got to call fast, because our listeners, they jump on quick and they fill up every phone line in a matter of seconds. That's right, seconds. So here's the number, 1-800-585-9396. You'll speak to Matt Gabinski, our call screener. He's amazing. And then you'll be able to listen live online. You'll be on the phone listening, so you won't miss a thing. So many people say, well, I don't want to call in because I don't want to miss any of the topic of the show. Well, you won't. You're going to be able to hear it. And then when we address you, you'll be able to come on. Here come the calls right now. See how quickly, dear listeners, it lights up fast. We're talking about race and racism today. We want to hear from you. What is your take on this very, very important, serious subject? 1-800-585-9396.
Yeah, in particular, we would more than welcome your takes if you feel you have been discriminated against because of skin color or your language or your country of origin or what have you. So let us hear from you. But if you maybe you go out of your way to show people who are minorities perhaps or of other skin colors that you want to make them feel appreciated, that would be something inspiring to our other listeners as well. 1-800-585-9396. We have with us on the show today, Richard Lane, longtime good friend of mine. Debbie, I presume you know him as well. He was born in Detroit, Michigan, to Mary O. Alexander, a retired educator for the Highland Park school system, and the late Dick Night Train Lane. He's a National Football League Hall of Fame quarterback. Richard attended Morehouse College in Atlanta and then served honorably for nearly 6 years in the U.S. Army Military Police Corps. He converted to Catholicism in April of 2003, and it was in early 2005 when he was led to begin proclaiming the gospel as a street corner evangelist. And now today he is one of the most sought-after Catholic speakers in the country, proud husband of Donna Lane and their beautiful daughter, Kay Alexandria. Richard, it is a blessing and an honor to have you with us on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. Welcome.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It's always a pleasure and an honor to be with you.
And, interestingly enough, I guess providentially, too, it is, I believe it's National Black Catholic History Month in November. Is it not, Richard?
That is true. I have been doing a series of different celebrations on our website, which is CatholicEvangelist.net, and just kind of celebrating different saints and different people that have really tried to help advance the gospel for African Americans, for those that have been displaced and discriminated against in the Catholic Church over the course of the last 400 years since African Americans have been brought to this land from Africa through the transatlantic way. And it's a lot of people say, well, is it a good thing to celebrate? Should we have a Black Catholic History Month, or why do we have Black Catholic churches, and why are they called Black Catholic churches? How come there just can't be Catholic churches? Well, number one, they are Catholic churches. Number two, it's a way of celebrating who we are and whose we are. Because African Americans, Hispanics, and some minorities celebrate Christ or celebrate their faith in different ways, and with singing, with song, with emotion, and things of that nature. And so it's a way of being able to celebrate who we are as people of African descent and whose we are as people of the same one truly holy and high God that we all belong to, who created us. And it's very very similar, because back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s in the United States, you had, especially on the East Coast, you had Italian Catholic churches. You had the Polish Catholic Church. You had the German Catholic Church. And they would celebrate. They would celebrate by their ethnicity, and basically that's what this is. Now, a lot of people say, well, why are we focusing on race? Well, basically because for so many years, African Americans were discriminated against in the Catholic Church. All the way up to the 1960s, African Americans at one time were refused to receive the Eucharist merely because of the color of their skin. Now we had been Catholic for many, many years, hundreds of years, but merely because of the color of our skin, we were refused. We were not allowed to receive the Eucharist. A lot of people forget and don't realize that at one time the Catholic Church actually owned slaves here in the United States of America, because unfortunately at that time of our country, in that time of history of our country, slavery was legal, and so why wouldn't the Catholic Church get in on it as well? And so one thing that they were told, though, was the Catholic Church was told, well, if you are Catholic and you own slaves, you have to treat them right. And so that means that you have to bring them to Mass and you have to allow them to celebrate the Eucharist. Now, I do parish missions all over the world, and it's truly an honor and a blessing for me to do this. And I remember distinctly about 2 years ago, I was in Meade County, Kentucky, at a small Catholic church there in Paineville, Kentucky. And it's a beautiful church. The church is made out of brick, and it's been there for probably about 100 years or so. And so someone had talked to me. I was commenting on how beautiful the graveyard was there that had been taken care of next to the church. And it was just absolutely beautiful. And so then I started talking about the history of blacks in the Catholic Church and how a lot of times, and they didn't realize that the one part of their church, it looked like the choir loft, but it actually was a slave loft where Catholic slave owners, and they would bring their slaves to church, they would relegate them to the slave loft in the upper portion of the church. And I taught them that. And so afterwards, there was a couple of people that came up to me and they said, Richard, there's an area about about a half a mile away from here, back up in the woods, and no one really talks about it, but there's all of these old graves back there, and nobody takes care of them. They're all back up in the woods. Would you like to go and see this area? And I said, sure, let's go. Long story short, we get back there, and this was a grave area where they would actually bury Catholic slaves that had served people at this particular church. But the graveyard had been grown over and was in the back of the woods, and it was hard to get to. These wonderful people said, this is part of our history. As much as we don't want to talk about the horrors of slaves, these people are part of the history of our church. And so they took all types of equipment and they cleared out that entire area, and they made that slave cemetery a beautiful monument, a beautiful opportunity for them to reflect upon the greatness of their past, and to really give tribute to those people that have gave of their lives. That's what Black Catholic History Month is all about. It's not about segregating, but it's about realizing and understanding the beauties of our church and how many great people that have really given their lives to help so many people in this great nation, so that we will never forget and actually never repeat the atrocities of slavery ever again.
Well, Richard, we're going to get to a break here. That's good stuff there. And when we come back, we've got a lot of calls. We're going to ask those of you on hold to be patient just a couple minutes after the break, because, Richard, I want you to be pondering this now as we look at the year 2015, not so much focusing on whether, there's any of this going on in the church or not, but I want to talk about, is the problem of racism on our streets, in our schools, in our workplaces, is it really this gigantic problem? Let's face it. It exists, and it's horrible. It's an abomination in any form whatsoever. I happen to work in the media. I believe that often it's a media construct. We could talk about what happened in Ferguson. I'm not saying a horrible tragedy didn't happen, but was it made into more than it was for the sake of TV? These are the things I want to talk about so that we can understand and, I think, have a better footing to stand on, in terms of race relations and making them better, not worse. So we're going to come back with Richard Lane here on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. And then Sandy, Lupe, Rose, and the others, we will get to your calls. We have one open phone line at 800-585-9396. Grab that line and join us on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie.
From EWTN News Nightly in Washington, D.C., I'm Brian Patrick with your EWTN Newslink. The Eiffel Tower closes again today, the day after reopening, following the Paris terror attacks. Police say 16 people have been arrested in an extremist crackdown in Paris since Sunday. France launches new airstrikes on militant strongholds in Syria. It demands European Union allies support military action against ISIS. Germany has said it will not take part in air attacks against ISIS in Syria. Republican lawmakers call for an end or limit to the number of Syrian refugees allowed in the U.S. Some have threatened to use a spending bill as leverage just weeks before the bill's deadline. And during their first meeting since the Supreme Court's legal redefinition of marriage, U.S. bishops uphold marriage as the union of one man and one woman. They vow to seek legal protection for those holding the same belief. I'm Brian Patrick with your EWTN Newslink. Join us tonight for EWTN News Nightly.
For a complete list of the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network AM and FM stations across America, go to EWTN.com. Look for the radio pull-down menu and select AM/FM stations. The list is updated regularly, so visit often. Again, go to EWTN.com. Look for the radio pull-down menu and select AM/FM stations. Also at EWTN.com, you'll find out how to listen to us on the web, on shortwave, and in some countries on satellite. You'll find it all on EWTN.com.
Hi, this is Teresa Tomeo, host of Catholic Connection, and we're glad you're listening to the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Well, Welcome back to Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. We're talking about race and racism today, and our special guest is Catholic Evangelist Richard Lane. And before the break, Richard, Jerry was asking about your thoughts on how the media plays into this idea of either, making this a great divide in racism or building bridges. Does the media help or does the media hurt? And can you kind of give us a little snippet before we get to the phones, because our listeners are waiting patiently? What role is the media playing? Is it positive or negative in race relations?
You know what? That's really hard. It's really hard to say because, unfortunately, you have the media is so politicized. You have leftist media, you have right media, you have media from different outlets. So and then you guys and I am part of the media as well. So it's really hard to say if the media does a good job. I know some outlets do an excellent job of reporting the news fair, and then I know a lot of outlets do a lot of put their own particular leftist or right slant on whatever they're covering. We just saw what happened at the University of Missouri here in the state of Missouri last week with these football players being able to bring light to a subject that has been plaguing the University of Missouri for several decades, which is the issue of race. I live here in St. Louis. As a matter of fact, I live less than 3 miles away from Ferguson, Missouri. And so the phenomenon, if you will, that happened in Ferguson last year is not something that just came up. It's something that had been perpetuated for several decades. It's an issue of systemic and economic racism that has gone on in that particular area that continues to be perpetuated here in the St. Louis metropolitan area that's been going on for many, many years. One of the things that you mentioned, and I'm so glad you said it, brother, was, number one, we have to realize that racism exists. We have to realize that it exists. And I have always said this over the last several years: is the only way that we're going to get over this is to, number one, realize it exists. Number two, we all have to sit down and have the conversation. We have to sit down and have the conversation because, let's face it, we all have some type of prejudice within us. Whether you're black, white, Filipino, Catholic, Muslim, doesn't matter. I've run into Catholics during my parish missions, and I've talked about Muslims, and I've had so many Catholics come up to me and say, "Oh, they're all going to hell. They're going to hell." They're prejudiced against Muslims, and they don't know. So again, we have to have the conversation, and we have to sit down and talk about what separates us, then talk about what brings us together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to hear from our listeners for Richard Lane right now on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. 1-800-585-9396. Thank you all for holding on so patiently. And Rose, you go first from Pennsylvania, listening on Holy Spirit Radio. Hello, Rose. How are you?
Hi. Very good. Thank you. Just wanted to comment. Actually, I was just listening to him, too. And I have to comment on that as well. See, for me, I think all this dwelling on the past, I just think that's what keeps us locked into it. I think 400 years ago, everybody was persecuted. Italians, Irish, Polish, everyone suffered some type of persecution. And you need to move on past it. And I think we've come a long way with that. I mean, I remember when there was only, when the Miss America pageant was all white. And then they integrated it. And nobody cared. But now we have just a black Miss America pageant. We have a Chinese school here, which is strictly for black people. So are we going the other way? Or instead of trying to blend everybody together, are we still keeping it separate out of pity or whatever, out of guilt? I just think we're one Catholic Universal Church. There should be no black church. In my area, they've done away with the Polish church, the Irish, the Italian. They've closed them. And those people moved on to their nearest parish church, and it's worked out fantastic. And just to me, I think that's what we need to start doing. Drop all these adjectives of what color you are, what race you are. We're American Catholics, and that's what we should be practicing, and not focusing on what happened 400 years ago. I mean, that's just how I feel. I think we keep going over and over, and we're never going to fix it if we dwell too much on it.
Rose, you bring up some really good points. And Richard, before you comment, I just wanted to tail on to Rose's statements that, it's interesting because what Rose is saying, I actually experienced a couple months ago. I was watching a documentary on public service channel about the Italian immigrants that came over in Ellis Island. And if you watched the documentary, it was a 2-part series. It was pretty horrible. I mean, it was horrific how they were treated, and they were treated so poorly, and there were so many rights that they weren't allowed to have, and they were treated like the lowest of the lowest in the community. And so Rose brings up a really good point. There was a lot of different ethnic cultures, a lot of different racial denominations that have been discriminated against. Are we still hanging on to that, or is it somehow, can we educate people to move past that? I think Rose brings up a very interesting point. I'd love to hear your response.
Rose brings up an excellent point. She really does. And to be honest with you, I would love to be able to move on from it. I would love to be able to move on from it. But when me, as an African-American man, 50 years old in 2015, still gets discriminated against because of the color of his skin, how can we move on from it? How can we move on from it? When I'm in a Catholic church in the United States of America, and at the sign of peace, and again, I'm not trying to pull out the race card. I'm not being sensitive. I'm being serious. Mm-hmm. At the sign of peace, when someone to my left will shake my hand, and someone in front of me shakes my hand, and then the gentleman to the right refuses to shake my hand. He shook everyone else's hand around him, but he refuses to shake my brown hand at the sign of peace. How do we get over that? How do and I'm just there to worship the same Jesus as he is. I'm the same Catholic as he is, but yet he can't shake my brown hand.
Richard, can I ask?
I'm driving.
Richard, can I ask you a quick question? So that man, let's go back to that man is shaking or not shaking your hand at the sign of peace. This is, and I'm really trying to learn, and if you're still listening, maybe we could try to learn from this, because I really want to learn from this. Do you think it's because, do you immediately associate it with the color of your skin? Or could it be maybe he doesn't like men? Maybe he doesn't like, I don't know how your build is. Maybe you're a small, thin man and he doesn't like that. Or maybe you're a big, robust man and he's scared of you. Or, you know what I'm trying to say? I don't know what, is it immediately?
Isn't that a form of prejudice as well? He doesn't like short guys.
Exactly.
Short guys, fat guys, whatever. But again,
exactly.
I'm a 6 foot average black male. I'm dressed the way everyone else is dressed in church. And again, I was not being overly sensitive that day. I even stuck my hand out there and left my hand out there. He shook everyone else's hand. There was blacks. There was actually, I was the only black there. There was whites. There was women, children in front of us, next to us. And again, I purposely left my hand hanging out there.
Gotcha.
Just so I would not be oversensitive. And he saw it. He looked at me, and he turned his head.
Right. I
looked at him, and I said, God bless you, brother.
Mm-hmm.
Well, on that note, Richard, hold the line just for a second. Rose, thank you for your call. We appreciate that. Race and racism inside and outside the Catholic Church. What's your take on it? At 800-585-9396. More with our guest, Richard Lane, when we come back.
EWTN is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If your cable or satellite provider doesn't carry EWTN's full programming lineup, give them a call and let them know you would like to receive EWTN 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
For more information, go to EWTN.com and click on television.
60 Seconds with Mother Angelica.
You know, on many of you who have not been to confession for years, I'll make a bet it's on nothing. You're ashamed. There's nothing you could tell a priest he hasn't heard before. You don't want him to know who you are. Go to another city. Go to another state. Who's going to know who you are? God knows who you are. So all of these things that we're so afraid of, people's opinion, it doesn't mean anything. You know what our dear Lord said about other people's opinion? The opinion of men mean nothing to me. I always wondered how the liberals are going to interpret that inclusive language. They wouldn't dare say the opinion of women don't mean anything to me. It must be the opinions of people. Whatever it is, opinion made nothing to him. Why?
The people you know and trust are on EWTN.
This is Patrick Coffin. Join me for Catholic Answers Live. It's 2 hours dedicated to Catholic apologetics and evangelization. Designed for Catholics and non-Catholics alike, it's your opportunity to hear from and talk with some of the leading apologists and theologians in the church today. You've got questions? We've got Catholic Answers. Catholic Answers Live, weekdays 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Thanks for staying with us on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. We have a special guest today, Catholic Evangelist Richard Lane, and we're having a very important discussion on race and racism. And Richard is with us the entire hour. We're so grateful. Richard, before the break, we were talking about how you had just a horrible, unfortunate experience during the Sign of Peace during Mass with that gentleman. And the reason why I was asking you, Richard, is not to try and change the direction of the conversation, but because me being, you've probably never seen me. I'm very ethnic looking. I'm very Italian looking, and I have actually reached my hand out at Mass a few times for the Sign of Peace, and I've had certain people not shake my hand as well. And I've often wondered if it was because I'm a woman, if it's because I look ethnic, and so that's why I was asking you. But it sounds like in your situation, you have deduced that this man definitely, based on the color of your skin, didn't shake your hand. And for that, I am truly sorry. How ignorant of him to do that. And that is just, as we all know, that is not at all Christian. And how sad is that? And so on behalf of everyone, I want to say I'm very sorry that happened to you. That must have really hurt you. And that's not the way to treat other people. And I feel bad for you on that. But I just wanted to clarify that because I wanted to see what your opinion was about, of what the cartoon bubble is over your head when things are happening to you. Because I have to tell you, being Italian Catholic, I get every mafia joke you can imagine. I've heard every one of them, Richard. Every one of them. And I don't even laugh anymore. Yeah, I could probably number them all. And, but I've learned to kind of, for me, it's part of maybe just, that's how God created me. So I figure, okay, Lord, this is what we're faced with. But we want to move on to the calls, and we have Sandy in Colorado Springs, Colorado, waiting so patiently. You get the Patience Award today, Sandy, from Catholic Radio Network. Hi, Sandy. Welcome to Take Two with Jerry and Debbie and our special guest, Richard Lane.
Hello. Hi. How are you today?
We're doing well. Thank you.
Doing
Good.
well.
Well, I was calling. I work in human resources, and, I several times have to tell my coworkers that just because you cannot pronounce the name or it sounds African-American does not mean you can overlook the application or the resume. If they're qualified, you have to bring them in for an interview.
Mm-hmm.
So
and how do they respond to that, Sandy?
So I said, I can't say their name. I said, so when you call them, you politely say, "I'm sorry, can you please give me the correct pronunciation for your name?" It's not rocket science.
Yeah.
You know,
well, Richard,
manners, you know. And, you know, Mr. Lane, I've had your experience several times in church. And in one church I had joined the choir, you know, and one of the choir members, she was just, and would never hold my hand when we were praying or anything. If I was next to her, I was like, that's enough. I left the choir. Just, you know, but everyone else is, you know, and I knew it, and it was because I was African American.
Can I ask a question? Because I'm curious. You know, I'm curious in nature, Sandy and Richard. Have you ever asked those people? You know, it's interesting because I've brought it up to people. I've said to people, are you against Italians? I've said that to people. Have you ever said to people, you know, is it because of the color of my skin? I mean, what is it that makes you so, you know, hurtful and so ignorant that you won't hold my hand in choir or shake my hand during the sign of peace? Have you ever brought that up? And I'm curious of what their answer is.
Never brought it up. You know, definitely not in church while, you know, we're, you know, going through mass or anything. But I noticed that, like when I was in the choir director noticed it. And then when I kind of just dropped out of the choir, he's like, if anything has happened, I was like, well, you kind of know what's happened. He's like, yeah, I know, Sandy. You know, and he apologized, but it wasn't him. You know, it's just like, you just don't want to be someplace where you're not feeling welcomed.
Right.
You know, and, you know, if, you know, it's happened to me several times, but, you know, you can't leave every church because someone's not going to shake your hand either. You know, I'm just as much a Catholic as you. I have every right to be here as you. We're worshiping the same God, and if you're hearing the same message I'm hearing, something's wrong if you're acting this way is how I look at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Richard, any thoughts for Sandy?
You know, Sandy, you know, you're very strong for doing that, and you're very correct in everything that you say. And again, you can't leave every Catholic church because the only way that we're going to be able to make a difference is, number one, we have to be there. Number two, we have to address the issues and let people know that, look, we are the same. We love God just as much as you do, and we all worship the same God. Even though God made my skin a little bit browner than yours, I've had people say, well, I don't see skin color. Well, guess what? You know, God, evidently you don't see things as God sees them, because God made us all different colors of the rainbow, and we're all just as beautiful as everyone else. And so that's one of the things that brings us all together. And we've got to be able to sit down and have the conversation. You know, I try not to be the quote-unquote typical angry black man when certain things happen. I try to bring light. I try to bring understanding to it. Whenever I'm preaching at a Catholic men's conference, I've preached at Catholic men's conferences before. There's 3,000 guys there, and I bring out the pink elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about, and I say, out of the 3,000 guys that are here, how many African American brothers do we have here? And there might be one or two guys, and I say, okay, out of the 3,000 guys that are here, how are we going to advance the Catholic Church to our African American brothers and sisters, to our Hispanic brothers and sisters? How come we can't invite them into our situation? It's a teachable moment. It's a moment of evangelizing that I try to teach people. Not that we are all separate, but that we have to do a better job of reaching out to others. Jesus did a wonderful job with the woman of Samaria. He went to Samaria. He went to where no other Jew would go, to the country of Samaria. Why? Because of racial tensions that had gone on for hundreds and hundreds of years. But Jesus broke those barriers and went where no one else had ever gone before. And that's what we all have to do. We have to be thirsty for so many people's hearts, and that we all have to be willing to go where no one else has ever gone before to be able to teach and preach the gospel to those that are in need of it.
Amen to that, Richard. Great, great words of wisdom. Great advice for Sandy and for the others. Sandy, thank you so much for your call. And keep in mind, if you ever want to join a choir with me, I'm happy to sing with you because I love singing in the choir. So it's awesome. Well, we're going to move right along to Lupe in California, also getting the Patience Award today. Richard, we hand out a virtual... Actually, it's a fake Patience Award, but it's a virtual Patience Award to the ones who are exhibiting great patience waiting to get on. And Lupe is the second one in California listening on Sirius XM 130. Welcome, Lupe. You received that award, and welcome to Take Two with Jerry and Debbie.
Hi, Lupe.
Hi.
What's your take?
Well, let me see. I'm going to tell you my experience. First of all, I have wonderful friends that are black, white, as well. I mean, where I work, we're pretty diverse. I work for a school district here in my city in California, in the transportation department, and. What I see in our district as far as how students that get into trouble, how they're treated, they seem to be more lenient on the white students than on the Hispanic or African American. We're doing the same thing. It seems that the white student doesn't get punished as severely. And I've questioned that why that happens, and I really never get a straight answer. In the workplace, about several years ago, I used to work in a property management company. I was a receptionist, and I had this gentleman. He came into the office and. Of course, as a receptionist, I greeted him. And he told me that I asked him if I could help him. And he says that he wanted to speak to an American. And I said, "You are speaking to one. I am an American." "No, you're not the right American." Mm. "Oh, excuse me, why? I didn't know that there was different types of American." And he said, I want to speak to her. He pointed to the white woman in the office. I said, "Well, okay, let her deal with you. I don't want to have to deal with you if you're going to have that kind of attitude toward me." But that hasn't changed how I feel people. I see character. And I think that's what we need to concentrate on, rather see character than to see skin color. It's obvious that there's physical differences, but character is what matters to me.
Well, Richard, Lupe, I want to give Richard a chance because I can just hear Richard wanting to, first of all, applaud you for your strength of character. But, Richard, I'm not going to steal any of your thunder, so go ahead, sir.
Yes, it takes so much of a great character like you, Lupe, to be able to overcome something like that. And those of us that are people of color have had to do that so many times throughout our lives. And so I applaud you, my sister, for being the bigger person, for being able to overcome that ignorance. And not only in the school systems, but I have friends that are in the legal system. And unfortunately, our legal system is a similar way. It treats African Americans and Hispanic men differently than it will treat you have a first-time offender who might be an African American or Hispanic. Unfortunately, they're going to get treated differently than a Caucasian first-time offender. Not all the time, but unfortunately, most of the time. And it's an unfortunate, ugly scene of our legal system right now that needs to be totally revamped. Again, it starts with each and every one of us. It starts with you guys that are hosting this radio show, that are in the media, being able to bring the conversation out into the open so that people such as Lupe, for people such as your previous caller, can sit there, can bring out our own stories and be able to have the conversation, not condescending anyone else or being condescending against each other, but being able to bring our own stories to the table and say, okay, how can we be part of the solution versus perpetuate the problem? Mm-hmm. If there is a media outlet out there, how are you going to be part of the solution? If we are then I always say I am pro-life. If we're going to be pro-life, we can't just pick and choose what lives that we're going to protect. We've got to be out there for the Michael Browns who's dead in the middle of the street. You know, if our Catholic Church is going to be for everyone, then guess what? Our Catholic Church has to be representative of everyone and in every situation, not just picking and choosing. We have to be out there on the front lines, again, addressing this horrible epidemic of racism. Just like the Catholic Church was out there 50 plus years ago, marching on that in Selma, on that bridge with Martin Luther King. There was 6 beautiful nuns that were out there, 5 white nuns and five brave white nuns and 1 brave black nun, all walking together with several white Catholic priests out there, all walking for peace, all marching for justice, not just black, not just white, not just Protestant and Catholic, but for all of God's children, because Jesus Christ died for everyone. He died for black people, white people. He died for Hispanics. He died for prejudiced people. He died for ISIS. He died for Muslims. He died for everyone. And we all have to be able to say and be like Jesus. If God gave his only begotten Son, if God loved the world and he gave his only begotten Son, if we love God, if we love our fellow man, we should be willing to put our lives down on the line and fight for each other.
Great comments. Great comments.
Battle that we have to fight for right now.
Great comments, Richard. Thank you so much. Lupe, we're going to let you go and get on with your day. Thank you so much for the call. This show is moving so fast, and we have so many calls. So thank you, Lupe, for your beautiful words, and you sound like a beautiful spirit. Thank you for your call today. Real quickly, Richard, I just wanted to ask you this. Now, we have very limited time, but I know I've gotten a lot of texts that asked for me to ask you this. Do you think, did the Black Lives Matter movement that's happening right now, do you think it's going to help, or do you think it's going to hurt the overall, kind of education that we're talking about?
That's an excellent question. I believe it's helping merely because it's being part of the conversation. Now, I believe that in the initial spirit of the Black Lives Matter movement, they did have a goodwill to bring that to the light. I believe. This is me personally. I believe some areas of the media have polarized that and have taken it to a different extreme. I'm the part of Black Lives, all lives matter, because not only am I African American, am I a black man, I also used to be a policeman as well, a military police officer. So, black lives, blue lives, white lives, all lives matter. I believe that the Black Lives Matter movement has been able to bring some light to the situation, but we have to bring a greater light to that conversation.
Well said. Well said, Richard.
right.
Thank you so much. Go ahead,
Now we're
Jerry.
going to move on to Denisha in Portland, Oregon, one of our great Mater Dei radio listeners. Hi, Denisha. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well, thank you. How are you today?
Doing well. Thank you,
Doing well.
Denisha.
Okay, I was give me a great time to pray. I'm just going to say it. I'm originally from Pakistan, and just like the brother that's sharing and some of the others shared, I've had experiences where twice in a Catholic church, once in a Protestant church, and it's not the church I go to now, thanks be to God, but somewhere else. I was asked not to come, and actually I was told that it would be better for me to go to a different church than there. Out now told, because whatever. But the point is that it's been just recently, so for a while there it was quite okay. I told everybody I was from Pakistan, but because of changes, whatever I had to go through, I've kept it a secret. And just recently I started to talk about it again, that I'm from Pakistan. But keep a long story short, it has made me, it has humbled me. It has brought me to my knees to go, okay, Lord, how am I that discriminated? Because where it comes from people's hearts and mouths, I don't think it's pre-calculated or premeditated. It's a shocking thing. One would never think that this particular individual would have that kind of response, but they do. And so to me, it's spiritual. So anyway, so I have been, I think somebody else said that earlier in the show, that we're all discriminating. We all have our own prejudices and dark spots in our hearts where we discriminate because, you know what, you're gross in your sin or whatever else. And I just want to humble myself, and I just want to affirm everybody that love knows no color, love knows no skin, and our basic call as believers is to love the Lord our God with all our heart, mind, body, and soul, and to love our neighbors as ourselves. And I just want to say that.
Now, Richard, I want you to comment, but I just wanted to tag on to something Denisha said, and that is the real problem lies if there's discrimination going on, if the things, Richard, you've described have happened in Denisha, then those individuals are the ones who need prayer. They need perhaps healing of some of their own wounds, and they very well may need to confess that as a sin. So the problem lies there, not with the person who's being discriminated against. But Richard, I have no doubt you were inspired by what Denisha had to say.
Yes, and she is so spot on. I was sitting there thinking the other day, many years ago, I had some friends who were Pakistani and Afghani as well, and I've lost touch with those friends. It's been 20 years ago, and I would love to try to reconnect with those friends now just to see how they're doing, because I know it's got to be so hard on people such as Denisha right now in the world that we live in. And that's why, again, we have to have this conversation, and we as Christians have to rally around our fellow brothers and sisters Christians, because they are being persecuted. Denisha is being persecuted, and we would not have known that unless we have had this conversation. And so it's up to us to be able to go to other people of color and to say, and to get out of that comfort zone and just to say, hey, how you doing? I just want to come and just introduce myself to you, just say, my name is such and such. Just to say hello, just to get to know you, because racism is something that has been perpetuated, that has been taught. You're not born a racist. It's something that's unfortunately been taught. It's unfortunately been handed down since biblical times. I mean, that's one of the things that they used to justify racism was Genesis chapter 9, verses 27. And that's one of the things that they use to justify racism. And it's up to us to be able to, if we want to get over this, if we're going to try to get over this, then we all have to do our part. That's to recognize that it exists and to do our part to ensure that it doesn't happen again.
Denisha, any final thoughts from you before we let you go?
I think I just want to agree with Richard about prayer and support. Now, I finally have a small group of friends, thankfully, that love me regardless of whether I'm from Pakistan or not, so I feel safe enough. Plus, I have the holy saints and the angels to be able to announce this. But for me, being a single mom and all, too, truly, I'm not kidding you, it became dangerous. And so there was a reason why I had to not say I was from Pakistan then. And so, but anyway, and the other thought that I had was that I think it's not just that they mistreat, but it's like they know for you what's better. Like when I was told not to come to their church, I was told they thought it would be better for me to go to an Iranian church. They thought that that's where I belong. And that's really turn up their nose and tell me like that. And I was like, wow. And this is not like same culture thing. They out now told me like that. And that they thought it would be better. And I was like, I'm sorry. And so I prayed a week about it, and the Lord told me to ask them, does Jesus come to your church? And I asked this lady that, and she said, yeah. I said, well, do you care if I come with him then?
Wow.
And,
I love that.
Yeah.
Wow,
So,
Denisha, that is a great point to end the call on. I apologize, and Russell and Anna Marie and the others, still got calls coming in. We just have less than a minute to go, and my takeaway is this, Richard. Debbie and I always have a takeaway before we end the program. My takeaway is, I said early in the show that I look at different people and I don't see color. Actually, maybe as I think about that, I do, and here's why. I know that there is racism, and this is not to pat myself on the back or anything, but I often will go out of my way to affirm, to say hello, to greet an African American, someone of Hispanic descent, someone who is obviously not white like I am, just so that they know, hey, you are welcome here. You are appreciated for your human dignity and your worth. And again, forgive me, I'm not trying to draw attention to myself, but I'm just trying to be a part of the solution, not part of the problem. Debbie, I know you've got a takeaway as well.
I do have a quick takeaway. Richard, I want to say thank you so very much. And Dinesha, I want to say you have a bigger family now and a bigger friend circle in Take Two. So take comfort in that. And the others, please keep the conversation going. We're sorry we couldn't get to you today. My takeaway is I agree with Richard. We got to keep this conversation on the table. I think celebrating all of our differences makes us the beautiful tapestry that God just shines upon. So, and we just want to say thank you to all the listeners and all the calls today. If you want to hear more about Richard's ministry, go to richardlaneministries.com, richardlaneministries.com. Again, dear listeners, until tomorrow, Jerry and I and Richard Lane want to wish you a beautiful and blessed day. See you tomorrow.